Hi, hello. Um, I wanted to add a couple of final things that I've been thinking about Cowboy Bebop since I watched the episode. It's been now like 3 or 4 days since I watched it, and I've been thinking about it a lot. And I'm recording this at like 4 in the morning. Sorry, I'm gonna try to be quiet here, so this is gonna sound a little bit weird compared to the rest of the video. But yeah, like I've just been thinking about Cowboy Bebop a lot since I watched it, because it's definitely one of those shows where like I didn't get like a very strong immediate reaction of it, but it's definitely one of those shows where like I just kind of sat there and looked at the ceiling and just thought about it for a while, and I've just been doing that for days now. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it a little bit is because so earlier I was talking with a friend of mine who is a big Cowboy Bebop fan. You know when you when you look at someone and you can tell like, oh, you're a Cowboy Bebop fan, like everything about their personality and the way they carry themselves, you're like, oh, Cowboy Bebop did a number on you during your formative years, right? Like that's the kind of guy that he is. And when like the topic of Cowboy Bebop came up earlier when a friend of mine was watching JoJo and we were just talking about anime, and I mentioned that I just finished it, and then we talked about it a little bit, non-spoilery, because we didn't want to spoil it for another friend. But something he did mention about the ending of the show, or not just the ending, but just a main core theme of the show, that is something that I probably didn't really pick up on a lot, but it's something that he brought up, and I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but he brought up loneliness, the concept of loneliness. And I was sitting there thinking about it, and up to a degree I feel like I caught up on it, but not fully. Like he did mention that like every minor character that you meet throughout the show is a character that is suffering from loneliness on some level. And I was sitting here like, I'm not sure if that's true. It could be true. I'm not saying it isn't, but I haven't checked. But like if that's the case, every like minor antagonist that we've had and shit, like that's a lot. But for me personally, like something I did pick up on is the fact that like everyone has a lot of bullshit in their past that made them the person that they are, but none of them talk about it, right? And that's something that's worth mentioning, because it's something I picked up on earlier, but I didn't bring it up right here at the end when it burst fruit to bring it up, because I feel like this final episode is when a lot of those walls come down, right? So Jet gets to see how much Julia means to Spike, like how much things mean to Spike, and how much she meant to Spike, and where Spike's head is at, which is something that you don't really see throughout the show. Like they're all very secretive with each other up until some of these very crucial moments, and more so in this final arc. Faye finally has a moment where she comes back here and she says that she remembered her past, but it didn't really mean anything because there's nothing left. So the only place where she has to go is back to the Bebop and the people that are in the Bebop. So those are the only people that mean anything to her anymore. And now she's sad that Spike is leaving and killing himself basically. And this is the first time that we see Faye just straight up accept and like admit that this is the case, that she cares about other people and that she wants to be around them. We've never seen that before. We can just infer it from a couple things, and this is something the show has done throughout the entire show, and you can see it, is that every character has these things where they have their issues, they have their traumas, and they run and they isolate and they do all sorts of stuff instead of just embracing it, accepting it, and talking about it. And there's something very real to that. There's something very real to anyone who has had, like, I mean, I feel like most of us have free storage space. Your computer's running low on storage space. That's nice. That's nice. Let me check that real quick. I'm gonna delete a lot of Photoshop files because, oh my god, I have so much bullshit here saved for no reason. Now, where was I? There's something very real about every character having something like that, Now with the way I can actually finish the show, we can have this thing where like we look back at every character and what their deal was. And Spike is this character that I actually did go to the wiki to check a little bit on things. Now that I finished the show, I'm like, whatever. And it's really nice that like the wiki has confirmed like one suspicion that I had. And given me no more information because the show doesn't give you a lot of information to begin with. You don't really need to know everything about each character's past. They only need to give you the specific things that makes them the people that they are, and that's all that matters. But something I was curious about is that you see a couple shots, and I don't remember if you saw them in the final episode. I think you do, but I don't remember in which scene. I was just editing it, and I was like, wait, I feel like I saw it, but I can't find where. But there is one shot that you see, and I thought I saw Julia and Vicious in bed together, and I was thinking like, where is that coming in, right? Like when you watch my reaction to the final episode at the very beginning, I'm thinking here like maybe it's gonna be like a love triangle kind of thing, and I think it was like I read the wiki and I think it actually that was the case, but it appears that Julia and Vicious were together, and then Spike had that moment where he like fell injured on her door, and she just nursed him, and then they started having a relationship. And if that's the case, then it was very, very much a love triangle. And if that's, and like that also makes Vicious a better character, but also applies the concept of loneliness to Vicious as well, because we can say that Vicious maybe was Spike's partner, like they were going on and doing missions together and stuff. You do see that in flashbacks, and he also was Julia's like romantic partner, and then suddenly his like partner and his maybe best friend are together, and Vicious is not part of the picture anymore for any of them. I can see how he would feel betrayed, maybe go like a little bit nihilistic and stuff. It's interesting because looking back at Jupiter Jazz, I think there was a moment where Vicious says something like there's no point in believing in anything. Makes me think that like maybe because of the Julia and Spike thing, like he actually turned like more fucked up. Like he stopped caring and believing in anything because he's like, well, fuck it, like everyone betrayed me, I'm fed up with this world kind of thing. So that adds another layer to Vicious and his relationship with Spike and Julia. It's something you can infer, which I picked up on a little bit of it, but I didn't bring it up at the end because I couldn't fully connect it, but the wiki has confirmed that for me. But bring it back together to the point of like the theme of loneliness. I'm not even sure if like the creator, I think Watanabe is his name, I'm not sure if he has mentioned it in any interview or anything, because when I searched Cowboy Bebop loneliness, there were like a few articles about it. So I'm thinking like, is this like something that the fandom knows and stuff? I just know that my friend mentioned it to me, and I was like, oh, maybe. So I was thinking about it. And now that you know that like that's Spike's past, Jet's past is that he lost an arm trying to chase like a criminal organization, but he also got betrayed by a partner, and also then his romantic partner left him, so he's all alone, and he just decided to leave and start doing his own thing. Faye literally has nothing and no one. She doesn't remember anything up until the very end, and even when she does, she still has nothing. And Edward is kind of like a stray cat. They literally refer to her as such. So I feel like this entire Cowboy Bebop like crew is like a ragtag of just people that are lonely and have nowhere to go. And that's something you can see, but that's also not like an entirely crazy unique concept. But I think the exploration as to what experiences made these characters is what's really important here, and that makes it unique, is the fact that you can see they are in a way a found family, but also at the same time not fully, because they're not committed to being a found family, because they are not fully open with each other up until the very end, when a little bit comes out that's not the case. It more than anything feels like a group of people that are lost in life, and they kind of like met up with each other, like almost like flatmates, like roommates, like by convenience we came across each other's paths, and they're all dealing with their own stuff, but no one is really being fully open with each other. And the thing is that whether or not that becomes like something that alleviates your pain or makes you forget about the past or makes your life any better, when it comes to like right at the ending of the show, that wasn't the case for Spike. And this brings me back to the fact that like whether or not you can take this as a cautionary tale or something, or a tragic ending, or a happy ending in a weird way, because this is also something I saw, because I I went and watched some Cowboy Bebop finale reactions too, because I'm a sucker for those videos, and now that I finished it, I can do that. But I saw someone that was like actually really sad, and then I saw other people that were like, well, not every ending is a happy ending. And I'm sitting here like, I don't feel like it's, and I'm just sitting here like, I don't feel like it's neither. I don't see this as a super sad ending. I don't see this as a happy ending. It's a weird mixture of emotions, because the way they present it almost feels like Spike might have never been able to be happy. Spike might have never been able to find a place to belong to, not even the Bebop. Because we see Spike in the Bebop because that's the show that we're following the crew of the Bebop, and Spike is there. But I never at any point felt like Spike gave a shit about it. And that's really important, because the only times we see Spike caring about anything is whenever it's his past. And even right here at the end, whenever he leaves the Bebop in order to go fight Vicious, he's not thinking about them. He's thinking about Julia and Vicious. So to me, this feels like Spike hanging out with Jed and Faye and Edward and I. It never felt like Spike was finding a new place. Maybe if they had kept going, like maybe if we gave them like 5 more years, because you can see that they slowly warm up to each other, but it wasn't enough time. But after Edward left and then Faye left, well, she came back later, but and then this whole thing with the Syndicate started happening. Like, that was it. I also do want to like mention as a final thing that I have been listening to this song that plays right there at the end a lot. It's called Blue by Mai Yamane, who is also the lady that sings the Real Folk Blues and other songs in the same soundtrack, and the Ring song too. And the lyrics are, never seen a blue sky, yeah, I can feel it reaching out and moving closer. There's something about blue. Ask myself what it's all for. You know, the funny thing about it, I couldn't answer. Things have turned a deeper shade of blue, and images that might be real, may be illusion, keep flashing off and on. Free. I want to be free, gotta be free, and move amongst the stars. You know, they're really earned so far. Feel so free, gotta know free. Please don't wake me from the dream. It's really everything it seemed. I'm so free. No black and white in the blue. Everything is clearer now. Life is just a dream, you know, that's never ending. I'm ascending. What's great about that song and the way that entire sequence plays out and Spike's character and everything, it really feels like life to Spike was like transitory, almost. Like, to Spike, life, and I'm not fully sure if he actually said this. I think he did. I think previous episode he said something along these lines, but like, it's like almost like Spike wasn't alive until he met Julia, and then whenever Julia was not there, he was also not alive. So it's almost like this thing where like, to Spike, life doesn't matter. And we talked about this before, the fact that like every episode he's like, fuck it, I'll die. But to him, life doesn't really matter, and there is something to respect about that, you know. And I just remember, because after I watched that episode, I went on fucking Tumblr and shit, and I was just scrolling, and I came across an image that I had seen before, but this really made me think about Cowboy Bebop, because I was thinking about it because I had just finished watching it. But this image was a screenshot of a Wikipedia article, I think, called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's common regrets shared by people that are nearing death. And some of them were, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. And what's interesting about this is that I feel like Spike, this is gonna sound like a little bit weird, because I can also see people reading it in the opposite direction, but I feel like Spike lived a life like true to himself in a way, right? Like, to him, just surviving on the Bebop, hanging out with Jed and Faye, that was never something that mattered really to him. Not a lot. Maybe given more time, it could have been. The only thing that was really in his mind was Julia. and that's something he couldn't move on from. And like that's the other thing, the thing about his eye, and that's a really great device in order to tell us a lot about him. Because if you think about it, like one of his eyes is fake, and he says it's always seeing the past, which what that really means is that any time he's awake, anytime he's looking at things, he's not seeing reality fully. He's half seeing reality and half being reminded about the past, which means that whenever he's not doing anything, whenever he's just thinking about shit, he's probably thinking about the past, because that's something that's always a reminder whenever he's awake, meaning that immediately hinders his ability to move on from it. And that's interesting why he talks up to Faye and says, hey, like, don't allow yourself to be reigned by the past or something like that. Forget about it. But then he's the one that can't do it, which in some ways is like, well, that's why he's telling you not to, because he's unable to. But about this image that I mentioned, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Like, I feel like that's really about that's something that does apply to Spike in a way. Like, he wanted to quit the Red Dragon. He didn't want to rise through the ranks. He didn't want to have a life as a gangster. He wanted to quit and just live with Julia peacefully, like waking up from a dream. I think that's what he said. So that's the only thing he wanted to do. And guess what? He had the courage to do that. He was someone that actually did do that. It didn't work out, but that was the only thing that mattered to him. And it's interesting because you can read this two ways, because another of the 5 regrets of the dying is, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends, and I wish that I had let myself be happier. These are all regrets that I feel like if given enough time to Spike, like 10 years, he would have gotten there. Like, maybe 10 years into the future, if he had lived, he would have been like, maybe I should have just chilled with Jet. Maybe I should have just chilled with Faye. Maybe they were good friends. Maybe it was worth it to stay with them. And he chose not to, right? But that's not something he regretted, because something very important about the final scene is that he has a peaceful smile. Like, as he's dead, he just dies with a peaceful smile. It doesn't look at all like he regrets anything. It just looks like that was it. That was his story, and he's content with the way it went. Because life to him never really meant something that he was committed to being in. The only thing that mattered to him was Julia. Julia's gone. And in some ways, and I like the spiritual aspect of it a lot, because it really doesn't mean much, but it is the idea that, like, maybe there is something after death. Maybe life is nothing but a dream, and if you wake up from it, maybe finally there will be something for you. Maybe finally he'll get to be happy. Like, maybe he'll be able to feel things that he was never able to feel here, I'm sorry if me saying a lot of these things just sounds like a lot of bullshit that makes no sense, because that is probably what it is. But also at the same time, like, if you had given me more time, maybe I could tell you more things about it, because this is definitely one of those shows that, like, you sit there and you think about it for a decade. Like, I said how I can see how this definitely would leave an impression on you, but also this is the kind of shit that you watch and then you sit there and just think about it for a long time. So me right now, I'm not doing a scripted video, I'm not doing research and shit, I'm just sitting here thinking and talking. So that's really all I can offer you. But hey, here's a fun thing to do. Whenever you watch Cowboy Bebop, what were your feelings on it? What were your thoughts on the ending? Like, what was your interpretation of things? Like, how do you feel about the characters and what they represent? Like, what were your thoughts when you finished watching the show, and where are they now, right? Like, if you rewatched it, or if you rewatch it alongside me, like, how do you feel about things? That's something I'm very interested about, because I can see this show being a show that a lot of people watched like 15 years ago, which makes me very curious as to, like, how did people feel watching it all the way back? And maybe if you rewatched it, how do you feel later? How do you feel about it now? And that's something very interesting to me. I would like to hear people's thoughts on that. And by the time you watch this on YouTube, it would have been like 2 or 3 weeks since I've seen it, and I probably would have made even more thoughts about it. But I really do want to hear more from people that have seen it and how they feel about it. This is a very discussion worthy show. How do you feel about the characters? How do you feel about what they represent? What kind of personalities they have? Like what their adventures meant, you know? Because my friend also told me when I brought up every episode that it's not a serious episode in the show, he says that those episodes are there for like levity, because then the ending hits you harder. And when I can definitely see that, but also I feel like there's a lot of like minor things that are being set up throughout those episodes that they're not the main focus. But if you like pay attention, you can pick up on, oh, that's something this character does, or this something this character feels. Not to mention the amazing world building, but I think that those episodes where they can be just levity, I think there's a lot more to them. More specifically regarding the characters and the themes that the show is going for. Well, I could say the theme is the past and how you feel about it. Another theme that was brought up to my attention by my friend is loneliness, which I can definitely see. I can definitely see loneliness being a thing. But it's more about like the loneliness that you have after you have some stuff happen in your life, because this is something that applies to every character with the exception of like Edward. After something happens in your life, you have this period of like trying to recover, trying to deal with it, or maybe not even doing so, just trying to survive. And like it's interesting because I've also been through that, you know. I've also been through that. And what's interesting to me is that like no character in the show is trying to like be better, like fix anything or talking about it. They're just dealing with it and just silently dealing with it. Like specifically, like everyone's just laying back and just coping and watching TV and eating shit food and not talking to anyone about it. And that's oddly endearing and relatable. Not in a good way, but in a very flawed, relatable way. And the way the show is not really condemning it or like praising it in any way. It's just like, this is just the way these people are. That's something that's very mature. And I really like that. But yeah, I think that's it for this final thing. I don't know what I wanted to say. I just wanted to say stuff in this final thing that I added to the video. This is gonna sound really weird compared to the rest of the video because I'm whispering and this is also like half an hour long. What the fuck am I doing? I'm just gonna go. I probably repeated myself from the previous segment. I'm going to go. I just want you all to know that like for the past like 3-4 days I've just been sitting here thinking about this fucking show. Like I talked to a friend of mine who hasn't seen the show and I was just like, so fucking good. And then I was like, shit, I need someone to talk about it. I talked to another person and they were like, I have seen it like a decade ago, and I'm like, shit, I need someone who's like seen it recently. I'd have my Cowboy Bebop head friend, but I don't want to talk to him about it because like I feel like whenever such a hardcore fan of something for like 15 years, it's one of those things where like I don't want to say anything to that person because that person is just going to be like way too in deep into stuff, and they're just going to be like, no, this minor detail, and I'm like, I don't want to have a conversation like that. I want to have a conversation where we're both just chilling and being like, yeah, man, that was so fucking cool. I'm just gonna go now. Oh, another thing I didn't mention at all during the previous discussion, but it's worth mentioning a little bit. It's the cat story. It's the Spike tells. Whenever Spike is telling the story about a cat to Jet, I mean, that's just his life story. But the way he says this is that there was this cat and he wasn't afraid of dying. He died like 1 million deaths, and he was also owned by a lot of people he didn't really care much about, which is it's Spike. Like whenever he says died 1 million deaths is, well, he faked his death against the Syndicate before, but also every episode he's like, well, fuck it, I'll just die, and then he doesn't. Like every episode, whenever there's any drama, he does something that in the moment there's like jazz playing and it sounds cool as fuck, but like whenever he's jumping into space without a suit, whenever he's like fucking burning into the atmosphere or some shit, whenever he's doing anything, it feels like he's gonna fucking die, and he doesn't. So when it says that this cat who died 1 million deaths but really wasn't afraid of dying, it's him. And it's every episode that you see him in. Whenever he acts reckless, it's because of that. He doesn't really mind if he dies. he has nothing going for him anyway. When he says he belonged to a lot of owners but didn't really care about them, he's referring to the Bebop. He has his friends, but he doesn't really care or not whether he's with them or not. Like, he constantly thinks, I'm just gonna leave. He constantly thinks about Julia, and that's the only thing he really cares about, finding her and just leaving with her. Again, he's always seen the past, but he has came across Jet, he has came across Faye, he has came across Edward and Ayn, and while he has warmed up to them over time, they were not really his family or someone that he wanted to spend time with. Those were not really his family. They were just more like roommates, I feel like. And then he said he became a stray cat and he didn't have really anywhere else to go. But then he met this female cat and they were together until the female cat died. And then he cried a million times and then he died too. And that was Julia. And it's interesting because the way he refers to himself is really like everything to Spike is like transitory. The only thing that he didn't feel was transitory was Julia. And then Juliet was transitory. And then Spike was like, well, life itself is transitory, so I'm just gonna go now. Dude, again, this show is so good. Like, it has been a long time since I watched a show where I'm just sitting here thinking like, man, for days now I'm thinking about like how it all makes me feel. So it's not just the themes. I think the themes of the show are fantastic and the way the characters are done is also fantastic. But if I have to give the show like a one thing that it does better than anything I've ever seen, is probably like the cinematography, if you can call it that in animation. But yeah, like the direction, the composition, the fucking music, like everything about the way they do things, it feels like everything is made in such a way that it will create a scene or a shot that will burn itself into your mind. There's a couple of scenes in this entire show that I remember vividly because they were amazing scenes visually. The animation was great, the colors were great, the music was fantastic, and like it's not just like good quality, but it's just the fact that it's built, it's made in such a way that it's meant to give you a specific emotion. It's supposed to elicit a specific feeling. So when you're watching something, you're just getting assaulted with this feeling, with this vibe, and that's something that carries with you forever. And I think that's what the show excels at, you know? Like, they have such an amazing like idea of like what theme to go for and what the characters are going to be like. But more than that, the reason why it can hit you the way it does is because it's directed. It's like written and directed and scored in such a perfect manner in order to complement that. And I think that's the main strength of this show. This show is so good. It's so fantastic. I was thinking about the Netflix show earlier, the live action one. And I was just thinking about like, I can see how people would get so upset at the live action Netflix show because I haven't seen it, but if it's fucking trash, and I have seen a clip, one clip, and I think it's of Edward in the live action Cowboy Bebop, and it looks like fucking Spy Kids. And you know, I'm down for that. That looks funny as fuck. But if the show is very much not about this, and when people think about Cowboy Bebop, they think about this, then I can see how people would just get so mad at this live action remake. Like, I can see how people would just lose their minds, just being like, oh my god, you're defiling something sacred. So that's so funny to me. I'll probably watch the Netflix show at some point. I'll do it on camera. If I ever do, I'm just gonna be like, this is fucking trash, and we're just gonna laugh together. But at the same time, like, this is definitely a show that you're just gonna remember forever. I feel like I will. And I can imagine a lot of people, when they first watched that years ago, maybe they were younger, maybe they were going through specific eras when they were teenagers, or maybe they were young adults. I feel like this is more relatable to like young adults even, you know, when you're going through that weird transition in your life, when like stuff has happened in your life and maybe they mark you and define you as a person, but you're in that place where you're not really sure where the fuck you're going, because that's Cowboy Bebop, I suppose. I'm just talking out of my ass here. I'm just gonna go. Please consider subscribing, commenting, liking, all that YouTuber crap. Check out the Patreon, link in the description below. This is the worst outro I've ever recorded. I don't have any energy. It's already 4:30 in the morning. I'm just gonna go. Take care, everybody. See you, Space Cowboys. Bang.